We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Football focus doing. Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady. We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam. So who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football, I like football season, all the things that go with
it. Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Eric Eager filling in for Sam. We're both remote. I'm coming to you live from my mom's basement here, Eric. Where are you at right now?
It's not the basement, but it is like my mom's like sewing room. So
nice.
You know, we perpetuate the stereotype daily here at PFF, and we do so here at 7 Central, which is great. You get me. This is how you know I love you, Steve. It's early. I'm ready to talk some football. I'm ready to get going.
Yeah, got you up like before the workday here to talk some ball. So appreciate you filling in. I think Sam and I are going to be back on Monday. You know, we've had these staggered vacations and all that going on right now. So today, though, Eric, I know you always have some takes as far as division winners go. I think the AFC is just a hot button. You know, how are we going to figure that out? How are we going to unpack the entire AFC? I want to get into that a little bit. You've got a favorite team that you've been tweeting about all year, you know, leading the bandwagon with one favorite team and then some of the other cool stuff we've been working on here at PFF. I want to start with the entire AFC because I think every time I'm talking about the 2022 season and it's like, oh, the Bengals are going to be good and the Browns and the AFC West, the Broncos are going to be good. I think there's a lot of good teams there, but at the end of the day, which of these teams is going to have a good roster, you know, have made all the right moves and then have 7 wins, 8 wins to show for it? How are we going to figure out this entire AFC this year?
Yeah, I think the bar is just higher in this conference, right? I mean, I think in the NFC, one of the reasons why we can, you know, gas up the Detroit Lions or gas up the Washington Commanders or the New York Giants is like, there's a spot or two open, right? Whereas in the AFC, you know, the question isn't whether teams can be good. I think the Tennessee Titans will be good. I think the Bengals will be good. It's whether they can be good enough to compete with, you know, the Buffalo Bills of the world, you know, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Kansas City Chiefs, you know, and like, I think it's that group of teams, right? I think like the Buffalo Bills are the favorite in the NFL overall. They're favorite in the AFC, and they should be. I mean, you look at, you know, that offense, really no weaknesses. I know that everybody in the fantasy community is talking either up or down Gabriel Davis, depending upon the day. That's
Jerry Rice. He's really Jerry Rice. Let's be serious with the last thing that we saw from him in the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like defensively, they need Kahir Elam to come in and play well. They need the linebackers to continue to play the way that they have, but they get Von Miller, a defensive front that in the past few years was really good, even though they really had no top paid players. And now they have Von Miller. So they're the favorite, I think. And, you know, relative to the other teams that I think are, you know, really good teams in the AFC, they don't have an easy schedule, but they have an easier division, right? And you know, Kansas City has and LA have the hard schedules, the hard divisions. You know, the AFC North, I don't know if it's going to end up being that hard with the Steelers kind of falling off and the Browns not being able to start Deshaun Watson for most of the year. But even then, the Ravens and the Bengals are two formidable clubs, right? And so, I think you have to bring into this discussion because of schedule, because of the additions they've made. You also have to bring in the Indianapolis Colts into the conversation in the AFC. All of those teams, to me, have an opportunity to win a championship, and I think Buffalo is rightfully the favorite right now.
It really does feel loaded in the AFC, and you didn't mention the Raiders, and you'll like this concept, I think, Eric, as a man who likes to place a wager or two. We had some listeners push back on us a little bit and say, you don't like our team, you don't like this or that, and one of our listeners,
and they're right, by the way,
they're all right. I mean, we do hate all 32 teams evenly. There's no bias there. One of the listeners came up with a concept, which was listener bets, essentially. So the listeners are going to call us out and say, so a Raiders fan, for instance, can bet, hey, my Raiders are going to win at least 10 games or 11 games or whatever. And they can wager stuff, if they want to send us coffee, if they want to send us some stuff. But we're going to put up Edge, Elite subscriptions, that type of thing. And these are pouring in. We're going to get back to our listener bets once Sam gets back, because we have to, as a podcast, officially accept or decline these bets. But keep those coming. NFL podcast at PFF.com. But it's a fun concept, right? So we can say if people really think we hate the Raiders, put your money where your mouth is. We'll go head to head on that. And we've gotten a little bit of that Raiders pushback here in the AFC West.
You don't have to tell me. I say that every single time. I mean, like, if you think the Raiders are great and you're irritated that people like me are not, gassing them up the same way we are the Detroit Lions, then bet those soft numbers, right? If you're a Raiders fan, you can go out there and bet the Raiders at over 8.5 wins. You can go, and let me look at this division on our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. Division winner here, you're getting a pretty good number. The Raiders are plus 650 to win the AFC West for the first time since 2002, right? The Jets and the Raiders, if they won divisions this year, it'd be the first time since 2002 for both clubs. That's great. I love that. Here's the thing I'll say to the Raiders, just to throw some cold water on it. Next year, the Raiders have 41 players under contract. Steve, you need 53 on a team.
Yeah.
They have 8.9 million cap space, 1.4 million effective cap space, 15 million in dead money. The Raiders are all in this year, right? So you could take it for what it's worth. You could say, okay, that means, Kansas City is clearly not all in. It doesn't look like they're going to extend Orlando Brown. They got rid of Tyreek Hill. They're still better than you, but maybe they have different motivation than you have. The Broncos are kind of like long-term, but also this year, kind of, good team. And then the Chargers, I think there's no team in the NFL that's more have to win this year than the Los Angeles Chargers.
They're all in for sure.
Yeah.
The Chargers.
I think if you're the Raiders, you're like, man, you put a lot of stuff into Chandler Jones and Devontae Adams and X, Y, and Z just to be the fourth best team in your division and then being cap held the next year. Like, sorry, Raiders fans, I'm not exactly sure if I buy into the same bets that you do.
I'm going to push back on that maybe in a minute, because I think the biggest story this offseason, I want to get your take on it. But first, reminder that the best place to play fantasy football this summer is Underdog Fantasy. Their Best Ball Mania tournament has $10 million in total prize money. And the best part is you just draft your fantasy football team and that's it. No waivers, no trades, no in-season management. Underdog gives your team the best score each week of the season, and the highest scores at the end of the year win. The champion of Best Ball Mania drafted last year during the summer, so there's no time like the present. To join Underdog, take your shot at $1 million draft. So Underdog's also going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code PFF. Also, if you play 10 of those dollars using promo code PFF, you get a free PFF subscription. So what are you waiting for? Head to UnderdogFantasy.com or the App Store, play $10 with the code PFF, and draft your Best Ball Mania team today. Eric, I really think the biggest story this offseason is the wide receiver movement. It's Tyreek Hill going to Miami. It's Devontae Adams going to the Raiders and A.J. Brown going to the Eagles. What are we going to learn? I keep coming back with we're going to learn a lot about the impact of those true number one wide receivers, right? So you have two elite quarterbacks in Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes losing their guys, right? We've never really seen Mahomes without Tyreek Hill for an extended period of time. We haven't seen Rodgers without Devontae Adams in a while at the level he's playing. And Ryan Tannehill's career resurgence, perhaps, was it Derrick Henry? Was it Tennessee? Was it A.J. Brown, actually, that was the resurgence there? How do you think this plays out with the guys on the other end, Tua, Jalen Hurts, and Derek Carr, how much do they get elevated, and how concerned should we be about Rodgers, Mahomes, and Tannehill and the drop-off of losing those top receivers?
Good question. I think on the field, willing to discuss that a little bit. I'm not as much of an expert as you, but I will say salary cap wise, it's very interesting, right? Because you look at the names you just listed. Tua, what's he on a rookie deal, right? Jalen Hurts, what's he on a rookie deal? And Carr, Carr's not on a rookie deal, but his money isn't necessarily in that sort of, right, like, top end.
He's in like the Carr bucket, right? I mean, he's created his own little
and good
spot.
for him, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, he's making a lot of money, but he's not making Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes money, and that might be the right place for Derek Carr.
Yeah, and that's what I think it ends up being, right? Because we found and a lot of research and frankly a lot of hours talking to you, chatting ball, we learned something about the league, and I think to use a baseball analogy, I think if you have a great number one receiver and you let's say you have a great quarterback, great number one receiver, let's just say it's the Packers with Devontae Adams. I think you're one of those like Oakland A's teams that can win 110 regular season games but can't win the playoff series because, during a season you're facing Detroit twice, right? And Detroit has no one who can match up on Adams. So you go ding, 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 and you win that game by 14, right? You play Minnesota, it doesn't have a good corner, so you can just throw to Adams as much as possible. And of 17 games, there are 14 eminently winnable games because of because of the way you're structured, and the rest of your roster is okay, not elite, because you're paying the two guys huge amounts of money. But then you get to the playoffs, and the characteristic of playoff teams is they're lucky teams, right? San Francisco had no injuries in their secondary in that playoff game. The LA Rams, the Packers got by them 2 years ago, but then they go to Tampa, and what is Tampa? Tampa has 4 or 5 day 2 picks in the secondary from the previous couple drafts, and they're able to neutralize Adams. Actually, MVS had a good NFC title game, but it was it's like the structure of your team. You can win the 13, 14 games, but you can't win against a team that can take advantage of your weak links, right? And I think what we're finding out is football is very much a weak link system other than quarterback. And what these teams are doing that acquire the Adams and the Hills, because those guys are essentially your quarterback, right?
Right.
Money wise and cap distribution wise, they're hoping that is their strong link. And I'll sell that a little bit. I think it's a good move, right? I like having Tyreek Hill when you're trying to figure out if Patrick Mahomes is good. I like having, Devontae Adams if you see if Derek Carr can take the next step after a bunch of years of being a good but not Super Bowl caliber quarterback. If you are already in that Super Bowl basin, right, where the Patriots were for the last 20 years, where the Chiefs are now, Buffalo kind of as well, I don't know if every additional dollar I plow into any position but quarterback is really worth it in one player. And I have some of my interns working on this kind of project, an offensive lineman, where after an offensive lineman sort of reaches a certain threshold, every single dollar, right? Every single dollar buys maybe, let's say, 1% better pass blocking efficiency. But that doesn't matter if your right guard stinks.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where I get an issue with the wide receiver one market. Now, we've always said wide receivers are extremely valuable. I think our pricing of wide receivers was twice that of over the cap. I think we've ultimately proven right here, but it's going to be interesting. I would sell all the teams that went heavy at wide receiver one.
Interesting. So, I mean, this is really, I do think the league has caught up to say our valuation of receivers. Not that every receiver needs to make $15 million. As a Corey Davis apologist through the years, I think Corey Davis was probably overpaid for a guy I think is a pretty decent number 2, who in any given year can look like he did in 2020, which was excellent complimentary season with the Titans. And then last year you elevate him and it's just not there. But I think the wide receiver one, the trickle down, I mean, just when you look at it on paper and it's after Devontae Adams, you also have this mismatch weapon in Darren Waller, top 5 tight end, maybe top 1, according to David Carr. And you have Hunter Renfrow. I mean, you have multiple weapons for the Raiders. So I wonder how that's going to be different. And the same thing with Tyreek Hill. He's going to this offense with a speedster like Jalen Waddle, with Mike Gesicki, another one of those mismatch type of tight ends. Kansas City may have stalled out because they didn't have option number 3, right? The last 2 years, really. Some of these teams that Tyreek and Devontae Adams are going to might have option 3 and option 4, which will make it interesting. I want to put you on the spot really quickly because Sam and I have discussed this before. As far as if you're starting a team, we all know, okay, we want to take the best quarterbacks. But we went through this thought exercise before. What if you had QBs, head coaches, and now I'd say wide receivers to choose from? Is there a point where you drop off, right? You only take the top 10 QBs or whatever it is. When would the head coach come in to play as far as starting a team? Is it after QB 5? Is it after QB 10? Is it after all 32 quarterbacks, right? Probably not. When does the head coach come in and when does the wide receiver come in? Because I think that's how teams are playing this right now. They're like, hey, I've got a rookie contract, Tua, like you said, my quarterback is Tyreek Hill financially, and that's the way we're going to get the most out of Tua. So where do head coaches and wide receivers rank, do you think, off the top of your head, as far as team building starts after the top quarterbacks?
Yeah. So if you go, let's say, and I'm going to say my prior is that Brady and Rodgers are going to play long enough for this to be okay. Right.
Yeah.
I think especially true with Rodgers, but also Brady, the guy was retired for 40 days. So so I think, obviously Josh Allen, Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers, those are kind of no doubters. I think Burrow, Herbert are in that sort of next category. I think this is where it sort of gets a little bit tricky. Let me actually.
You don't have to be specific. I mean, I think at any given time, right? There's 8 to 10 quarterbacks that you would take.
Yeah,
right?
But I actually want to give out a number here, but I want to make sure that I have it up to where my numbers are here. So because I want to get to the last group, which is sort of going to be my point, which is I think that there's a group of 2 players where this actually becomes a deal here. And okay, here we go. So I think you go, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, assuming everything's okay.
Yeah.
And then you go, and not everything's okay, but assuming that all the suspensions are over with.
Right. He's going to play football. Right.
Then I have Lamar Jackson. I firmly would put Lamar Jackson over that group. And then I have 2 guys where I'm not thrilled with this choice, but I would do it anyway because I think with these 2 guys, you can win a Super Bowl. Some years it's going to be frustrating as heck, though. And that is Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford. I think with Matthew Stafford, you sort of showed last year that when things came together, it wasn't pretty all the time. The Titans Sunday Night Football game, the Jaquiski Tart throw, the meltdown against the Niners in Week 18 and all that kind of stuff. Yep. But, he's talented enough to win a Super Bowl. I think Dak Prescott's in that range as well. My issue is obviously we haven't seen it yet, but I think he's good enough for that. I think everybody after that. So I would probably take a head coach or build a roster before I went with Tannehill, Carr, Cousins. Ryan's interesting, but I think he's kind of over the hill. Murray's another
at this
one.
age. Yeah.
I think Murray's another one where I was on Locked On Arizona, and I think I probably didn't make a lot of friends when I said, I think it's a bad bet to give Murray the max, and ultimately, you and I would say, hey, let's get a guy a middle-class quarterback contract if he's that way. But we live in the real world where no one other than Blake Bortles has been a number 1 pick and gotten kind of less than the max or more than the, hey, Jameis, here's a couple million a year, that. That's kind of how it's been. And so if that's the Boolean I have to make a choice with, I'm going 0 on Kyler. I'm letting somebody else see if they can make Kyler into something on $45 million a year.
Explain to my listeners what Boolean means, Eric. Come on, man. You can't use jargon over here. PFF NFL podcast. I know.
0 or 1. Yeah. A variable
yes or no.
0 or 1. True or false.
I know. It's a bold move. I want to get to I think Sam and I landed in a similar spot. We talked about this maybe over a year ago, and we kind of got to this. Whoever the top 8 or 10 quarterbacks are, I would take them first. Right. I mean, I don't know how much you learned from, say, Brady being away from Belichick for a couple of years, but the fact that Brady went on to elevate Bruce Arians, say, to a Super Bowl, champion winning quarterback. I think it helps confirm the value of the quarterback outside of the head coach. Not that Belichick doesn't deserve credit for finding Brady, for creating this world where Brady can flourish and all this stuff. But when you have that elite quarterback, they can elevate the next head coach, right? Whereas Belichick's not. We'll see if he ends up winning Super Bowls with Mac Jones, but they weren't a Super Bowl contender the 2 years after Brady, right? I mean, we see the value of the quarterback maybe over the head coach.
Well, and you're of the belief, right, that you would like that. It is the first X number of picks that are quarterbacks, and the teams that have to end up picking head coaches are worse off than the teams that get to pick the quarterbacks. But they're better off than if you say, all right, we're starting a team with Ryan Tannehill on $40 million APY like that. I mean,
right.
I sort of, this is kind of, again, this is my sort of, this is where I think Stafford's at the boundary, because the Lions didn't prove, but they sort of gave a lot of evidence to the idea that you can't build around Matthew Stafford. You can put Matthew Stafford on a winner and win. And I think that's kind of I think that there's some dysfunction in Detroit, of course, or there was. And so that kind of but Stafford was there for a decade, right? So, and they were, 9-7. I mean, they fired Jim Caldwell because they were too mediocre, right? More than they were just like the Detroit Lions. So, but, Dak, and the question is, can you build around Dak? Because that's kind of what Dallas is trying to do now. Can you build around a quarterback is maybe the answer. And I think Dak and Stafford are at least not hard nosed for me, whereas Carr, Cousins, Tannehill are hard nosed. I can't build a team around them. So I'll start with coach, and then I'll try to catch some luck later on.
Do you think receiver jumps into that equation at any point there, similar to head coach, with the just the top 5 receivers, whoever they are? Yeah, because there's not a head coach. There aren't that many truly difference makers at head coach, right? There's, Andy Reid, Belichick, Tomlin, Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, McVay. I think Vrabel's in that discussion now.
Vrabel's one that's really good, right? I think ultimately, and this is somebody who, I constantly try to make sure that my opinions reflect what I think in reality is. I never thought Vrabel was that good. He had the problem, he had the punt against the Ravens in the playoffs 2 years ago. That was bad. I remember being at the AFC Championship game in 2019 where they had a 10-point lead against the Chiefs, and Chiefs scored a touchdown, and Vrabel, they come out, and it's obviously it's Arthur Smith calling the plays, but Vrabel, they go run, screen to Deion Lewis. And I'm like, this game is over. You just lost your chance to win against the Chiefs by being conservative. But it's unmistakable. They got the 1 seed in the AFC last year, and they played the most players in league history. They had so many injuries. And I do think Vrabel and Tomlin are in this sort of same equivalence class of being able to sort of get more out of a team than the players give rise to. So I think Vrabel's there. I honestly, that's a big part of my bull prediction for the Detroit Lions is that Dan Campbell is kind of that rah, get players to play for you. I think Pete Carroll at one point had that and then kind of lost it, but I don't think, there's a half a dozen, maybe 8 coaches then that I think get taken. And then from there, you're going wide receiver. You're going offensive side of the ball, and it's wide receivers. And if Travis Kelce was a little younger, you maybe take Travis Kelce, but an elite
tight end for sure.
Yeah. Kyle Pitts could be that player. I think Mark Andrews can be that. I think Mark Andrews showed last year that he's really freaking good.
He's QB proof, right? They had Josh Johnson coming off, team number 87, and
it shows how important development is in the NFL, because I think most of us believe that Andrews, who wasn't even the first tight end taken by his own team that year, was just kind of a guy that was the beneficiary of an offense that gave tight ends layups all day. But ultimately last year, he did most of that. He did a lot of that stuff on his own, and I think proved a lot of people wrong in that regard.
I keep going down these quick rabbit holes, but when you're evaluating head coaches, how do you balance what you can see versus what you can't see? Because I think it's easy for us as analysts to just focus on the fourth down stuff, right? And we could put head coach rankings out there, here are the guys who go for it on fourth down the best, and all of a sudden it's but that's a fraction. It has a big impact on outcomes, but it's a fraction of what they do. How do you balance the stuff you can see, which is in-game decision-making, versus the fact that they're really the CEO of the team? It is about getting the entire team to play, putting the players in position to succeed. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we don't see. Is it really as simple as like, here are expectations, here's where they landed? Because I guess when you get back to Vrabel, they keep exceeding expectations, right? They shouldn't have been in the AFC Championship in 2019. They shouldn't have been the number 1 seed last year. Whether he's going for it the right time or not, at the end of the day, Mike Vrabel, like a Mike Tomlin, that's the proxy I always use for those two. They just end up getting the most of whatever's on the field. So how do you balance that? What seen versus unseen when evaluating coaches?
Well, and even I think Belichick is sort of in that same class where they're like, they're finding an edge somewhere that I'm not seeing, right? It's player development. I always talk, I think the biggest hidden edge in NFL right now is somehow figuring out player development, because the NFL is going out of its way to tell you it doesn't matter, right? Like that we live in a potato chip league in the NFL where, you draft a guy. If he's good, you play him for 4 years. If he sucks, you just draft another guy and play him for 4 years, because, unlike, 20 years ago, let's say, like draft picks are super inexpensive, right? Both trades and money. So like there's player development that maybe we're not taking into consideration. There's obviously the motivational aspect. I think that the hard part is, and we're seeing this a little bit with Belichick. I know it's sort of sacrilege to say this to a Patriots fan or a Brady fan or whatever, wherever you would classify yourself right now. But like Belichick has lost a little bit of the in-game stuff. Like he doesn't go for 4th downs or anything the way at the rate he did back in the day. The Indianapolis game in 2009 comes to my mind. And the league is sort of like the league is sort of eroding some of his other edges, right? Like when he was like, hey, I ran the 3-4 because no one else did, and I can get Ted Washington cheap, and I can draft Ty Warren, and I can draft Vince Wilfork, and I can, play with players who no one else wants but are amazing to me. Like we're seeing that edge erode a little bit. And so with that, like I think the Patriots were lucky that Brady went from being, in my opinion, like a 7 out of 10 quarterback to a 10 out of 10 quarterback during that evolution, because that ended up buoying the Patriots. So I think if you're not like a tactician, like a true, like a Shanahan, McVay, Reed type of guy, and you are more of a motivator and more of a interpersonal guy, Tomlin stood the test of time, but I don't necessarily know, like we've seen Carroll fall off. So that would be my case against the Titans, would be that I think Vrabel's great at that, and I think it's hard to sustain. I could be wrong.
Gentlemen, all men strive for gold in their life, right? Gold medals, gold watches, gold everything. However, there's a certain type of man that goes the extra mile. He walks with the confidence of an eagle and giggles in the face of danger. Do you guys have this read at the on the PFF forecast? He's a big hairless winning machine, Eric. When he unzips his pants, he sees platinum. That's right. Manscaped would like to introduce you to their best and biggest ultimate hygiene bundle yet, the Platinum Package 4.0. Manscaped is the leader in below-the-waist grooming. Now trust them with the whole shebang. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF. Manscaped's brand new Platinum Package 4.0 is the biggest bundle they've ever offered, giving you a bulk discount on Manscaped's top products. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF at manscapes.com. It's 20% off with free shipping. Manscapes.com. Use the code PFF. It's time you enjoyed the finer things in life and get yourself a platinum package for your platinum package. Smooth. Go Manscaped. Go check it out. Manscaped.com. All right. You said something crazy earlier. You wouldn't sign Kyler Murray. That leads us into Lamar Jackson, unsigned. He's heading into his 5th-year option. The Ravens have not locked him up. So there's some contract drama there. We'll get into Orlando Brown as well. Let's start with Lamar Jackson, who right now is in the news because it's July. In the news in July is when a former box safety from the Ravens, Bernard Pollard, that's right, I know who he is, even if Lamar doesn't, the guy who put Brady out for an entire season. Bernard Pollard saying, hey, players don't want to go play with Lamar. Receivers don't want to go play with Lamar. Look, there could be some truth to that because it's not Lamar. It's the fact that they're a run-first offense and receivers want to put up numbers. But Pollard's coming out. Lamar, it's a new world, man. Like Lamar's just clapping back on Twitter and, going head to head. But from a contract standpoint, Lamar's still unsigned heading into his 5th-year option here.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate. Well, for one, God gave Bernard Pollard Brady's knee, and then of course nothing else after that. We're only given so much. And Brady's knee, of course, the ultimate score there. Apparently, I could see it in a sense that they might. I am not going to get all these targets. Like Hollywood Brown was like one of his best friends, and he's just like, yeah, but I'm not getting the throws.
Right.
But that. It's interesting, right? Like I love these discussions, especially with you, because, I think, one of the great thinkers in football. It's like when something happens that we can't explain, it's our job to go in and dig deeper, right? So like Lamar Jackson, some of the stuff doesn't add up that much, right? Like when they were winning, 19 and 20, they had great efficiency offensively, with only spending 66% of their cap on defense and not spending it on offense and the wide receiver play. We're looking around and we're like, why does Lamar Jackson's PFF WAR, why is it only 21st since 2018? We look around and say wide receivers matter a ton, and this team's wide receivers frankly stink. Like even Hollywood Brown, who, garnered a 1st-round pick in a trade, he's not that good, right? Like he's not an elite wide receiver. So it's our job to sort of look in and see why. And I actually am very much in the camp of you as well as like over the course of years, a couple games, whatever, but over the course of years, if a quarterback wins, we have to be able to explain how. Yeah. And one of the things we looked at with the NGS data was how linebackers move. So I looked at sort of tailored to expectations. So how often a team runs certain concepts, how often does a team run play action and so on. How voraciously do linebackers flow, both in the run game? So after 2 seconds, how close are they to the running back relative to what you'd expect? And then in play action, how displaced do they get on play action? And in theory, you want these linebackers displaced. You want them moving. You want that middle of the field, as Lamar showed in 2019. The middle of the field is the most valuable place in football. And if you can pepper the middle of the field with throws, you are going to be efficient. Last season, Jimmy Garoppolo had two big time throws and 15 turnover worthy plays on 10 to 19 yard passes, and he had an NFL passer rating of 107.4 on those throws. So Crazy. Even if you suck at throwing the ball over the middle of the field, if you do it enough, you are going to be an efficient offense. And what I found amazing was because we have NGS data back to 17. So we can see Flacco in 17, we can see Flacco in 18, and then we can see Lamar, and then we can see Hundley. Teams have progressively, in the switch from Flacco to Lamar, have stopped moving on play action and have stopped moving against the run, right? So their linebackers just sit still. And it's gotten worse as the seasons have progressed. So one of the things is, okay, Lamar Jackson is such that every defender is more stationary than they were before, right? That's not showing up in our data, right? That's not showing up in our traditional data. That's not showing up in passer rating. That's not showing up in QBR. That's not showing up in anything. But it's an explanation for why Gus Edwards is like 5 yards a carry every year. It's an explanation as to why, Mark Ingram, who it's just an okay running back, right? Let's be honest, it is getting 1,100 yards for that team. It's an explanation for why, even though Lamar, we can clearly look at some of his underlying passing data and say, there's a little bit to be desired here. It's why that team can win with him, right? And so I'm of the belief, and I know that the Ravens, Eric DeCosta, EDC, every dollar counts. I think that is their mantra. And I think, unfortunately, because Lamar is so polarizing, the Ravens being extremely diligent here and turning every stone, I think it sort of confirms priors for some people. I think they end up getting a deal done. And I think the Ravens end up being okay still, with Lamar. And I think if the problem is there's one projection here that we all have to take into consideration, and that's, can Lamar stay healthy? because he is unlike any other running quarterback in the history of the league. When Mike Vick in 2006, our first year of collecting data, when he rushed for 1,000 yards, 3/4 of it were on scrambles. When Lamar rushed for 1,200 yards in 2019, 2/3 of them were on design runs. Like, we're just in uncharted.
He's not a scrambler. Yeah,
we're in uncharted territory with him, and we can't sit here and be like, oh, Lamar this, Lamar that, and then also be like, hey, running backs this, running backs that, and not kind of project a little bit onto him. I know his yards before contact are way higher than a normal running back. He's not being hit by linemen that much, all that kind of stuff. But we saw a little bit of it last year. It's just hard to stay healthy when you are playing that style of football at the quarterback position.
So, last year at this time, we had, you get the anonymous source who's like, hey, I think the league's going to adjust to Lamar Jackson. And of course, you get some overreaction in the social media world when you hear phrases like that, thinking, the Lamar, you can't adjust to Lamar. The league's going to adjust to Lamar Jackson. But you're actually given some data that's saying maybe they have adjusted to that offense. And whether it's Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow, any quarterback that has success. And we've seen a lot of this in recent years, right? The year 2 success for Josh Allen, it was year 3, but Carson Wentz peaked in year 2. Lamar so far has peaked in year 2. Joe Burrow's coming off of year 2 Super Bowl
Patrick
run,
Mahomes
highest graded
year 2.
Patrick Mahomes technically peaked in year 2, right? I mean, he hasn't fallen off a cliff, but his best year was his second year, first year as a starter.
His yards per attempt have gone down every single year since he started.
So that is the NFL does adjust, right? Right. They completely changed how they played the Chiefs last year defensively. You're describing how teams might be playing the Ravens differently. This has to be a part of consideration, right? So when you're talking, I think Lamar Jackson is a transcendent talent in that his skill set is unique, right? There's nobody that runs like him and that you can build a rushing offense behind. You can build one around Jalen Hurts or Taysom Hill, but not at the Lamar Jackson level. But do we think that my point is, do we think that the Ravens are actually concerned that, look, we've got a cool tool in Lamar Jackson where we can run the ball more than anyone else. We can run a unique offense, but it's eventually going to be capped and limited. And as the NFL adjusts, we're going to have issues. Is it that? And then my other question from Lamar's standpoint is, I wonder how much it's just, what does he want? He's looking at this like, dude, I was an MVP in year 2. And, I nobody else has done what I've done. We had the best team in the league. We'll do it in the playoffs once we get there. Lamar's confident. And quarterbacks want different things, right? Mahomes and Allen both seem to want that long-term deal. They want to be the face of the franchise. They want to be there for 15 years, Kansas City and Buffalo. With Dak, it seemed like Dak with Dallas wanted to, maximize his value and hit the open market again at some point. And, so does Lamar want different things than the Ravens? Do the Ravens want a short-term deal? Lamar wants long-term. Is it vice versa? I mean, to me, that's part of the equation too. How much is what Lamar wants a factor in here where they don't have agreement?
Well, I can tell you the Ravens' thought process is they're using all the tools at their disposal, right? That you look at, and I've had conversations throughout the league where it's like, the cautionary tale is, and the cautionary tale is Jared Goff. The cautionary tale is Carson Wentz. It's, and I think that one of the important things, we must have talked about this on the show before, but like the quarterback contract extension is a trophy more so. Well, it's obviously great money for the quarterback, but it's for the general manager as much as it is for the coach or for the player, right? And it's less so, right, for a guy like Lamar, because Lamar wasn't even the Ravens' first round pick that year. But like for a guy, and Dak was another one. There's and our guy Brad Spielberg, who you've had on the show, is fantastic. He's shown this. Like the further you get down the draft rung, the less like the general manager himself is trying to confirm his own priors, right? But a lot of it, but I think when you look at the Ravens, they look at the Rams and say, well, what the heck were you doing? You had 2 more years of team control and two franchise tags, and you went all in on Jared Goff right away when it's not clear that you had, like, I think you and I both agree the biggest the biggest, most difficult problem in sports analytics, the most important one in football, is not whether or not this quarterback you draft is good. It's whether the quarterback you drafted, supported on a rookie deal, who is competent, is good enough to win with when you don't have that. And I think the Ravens got lucky a little bit last year, and they had something of a natural experiment, which was you lose both corners, you lose your left tackle, you trade away your right tackle, all the running backs are gone, wide receivers stink, and you're 8-3 and in the 1 seed in the AFC, despite the fact that Lamar didn't play all that technically well during the part of the season. But I just think they're using everything at their disposal. And I think with respect to Lamar, he doesn't have an agent, right? Like, one of the reasons he's not in the top 10 list of general manager, of decision maker quarterbacks is he doesn't have his agent pounding the table for him all the time. But like the answer probably is Lamar doesn't know what he wants because he doesn't have somebody next to him sort of contextualizing what this whole thing is. And I think the Ravens, a team that is very smart, not perfect, but very smart, will run circles around somebody like that in negotiation. And that's kind of what we've seen. And that's unfortunate, I think, for the quarterback because it injects a lot of uncertainty in that team, but it's probably right for the Ravens to do until, they get, somebody with some experience on the other side negotiating the deal.
What about in Kansas City with Orlando Brown? The Ravens traded Orlando Brown. The Chiefs got him just before the 2021 season. He played last year, still on his rookie deal, pretty cheap, gets franchise tagged this offseason. I was critical of the trade at the time. I think you had some criticism of the trade at the time from the Chiefs' perspective. My criticism was at some point the Chiefs are going to have so much money locked up in the offensive line, it's going to hurt their playmakers, whatever. Now Tyreek Hill's gone. We'll see. I don't know how much those were really dependent. Sam disagrees with me on that, whatever you want to say. But at the end of the day, if the Chiefs, Orlando Brown might be holding out, might not have a long-term contract here for the Chiefs. If he walks at the end of the year, and at the end of the day, the Chiefs have given up essentially a first-round pick for 2 years of Orlando Brown, and then the comp pick that comes back from him leaving, is that a win in the long term, or do the Chiefs really just need to lock him up to kind of confirm to prove that trade was worth it and have Orlando Brown and Joe Thuney locking up the left side of their offensive line?
It's not a win, but it's the loss by the least amount if that ends up happening. And I think, like I said, that they were dealing with the Ravens. When we make a deal with the Ravens, you're probably going to lose, right? Like they just have the whole thing mapped out. And I think that probably Baltimore didn't expect the Chiefs to let Orlando Brown go after, let's say, a franchise tag or two and get the comp pick. But, we forget that they got the Nick Bolton draft pick back. So it wasn't it was a first round pick and a third and a fourth for a second and Orlando Brown. So it was something depending on how much chart you used, it was something like the equivalent of like the 40th pick, right? So I think I remember like canceling off a lot of the trade and saying it comes down to Orlando Brown for a first rounder after all the exchanges. Yeah, right? It depends upon how steep your curve is. Yeah, but like if you're looking at a late one, let's say for argument's sake, for 2 years of cheap Orlando Brown, competent Orlando Brown, not great Orlando Brown, and then you get a third round comp pick back, like it's a loss, but I don't think it's a huge loss. If you pay Orlando Brown what he reportedly wants, which is $25 million on, $25 million tough. APY deal, it's an L from the jump here. So, I don't think it's going to be done. I think reports, I can confirm, like some of them, I think that they're far away. And I think Orlando Brown, like also not having an agent until the last 6 weeks really has hurt him. And the agent that he did get is not a football agent, not like skilled in any of these things. So there's an aspect there that's tricky. So I in my opinion, Orlando Brown was answering a different question in 2021 than he's answering now. And it's another important thing where once you get additional information, your answers can change, right? So last year in April, the Chiefs had Joe Thuney, Austin Blythe was their center, Kyle Long and Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, neither one of whom had played the previous year, were their right guards. And then some combination, Lucas Niang, who sat out 2020 because of COVID, Andrew Wiley, who had an infamous Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, and, Mike Remmers were their tackles. And so I can understand the desperation, especially when you're already pot committed to being the best team in the league in 2020 and 2021, going after Orlando Brown. I think it was very smart not to extend him then, right? Because ultimately you left that open. Now, where the Chiefs are with Tooney, Creed Humphrey, who's a PFF All-Pro, Trey Smith, who's had a pretty decent rookie year, and I think is going to be their starting right guard for a while now. And then, Andrew Wiley was competent at times last year. Lucas Niang got, patella tendon injury, so we don't know if he'll come back. But then they got Devon Kennard from Kentucky, who graded really well in the SEC and might be a dark horse to start on that line. Now the question is, do you need Orlando Brown when you have an offensive line with 3, maybe 4 competent players? I think the answer is no. Like, I think they're perfect. I don't think it's great if he sits out the season, but I don't think it's a catastrophe. Whereas last year, the betting markets had in the first round 6.5 offensive linemen being taken. It ended up being 5, and one of those 5 was Alex Leatherwood. I think that the Chiefs looked at that group and said, there isn't a starter where we're picking. And It's probably worse to trade up for a guy, let's say like, and he ended up being good, but the guy for the Vikings, not Rashawn Slater, Christian Darrisaw. If they trade up for Christian Darrisaw, are we, that's another Brett Veach trade up that we're a little bit nervous about, right? So I think that ultimately, they were in a bad spot. And sometimes you're put in a bad spot. Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher both get hurt the same year. They had been your tackles forever. They made a play. I think that, obviously it was negative EV, but they're not compounding it right now by sort of tethering themselves to the decision they made last year.
Interesting. They might, because I part of my criticism was I felt like they were going to feel the need to lock up Orlando Brown, and it was going to really affect them long term, but it might end up being the right play. I like the idea of looking at moves from a 50,000 foot view, which is like, what were you doing at the time? What did you get from your trade? And then what did you get in return? And maybe it's not that bad. And then the point you make about Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith developing as rookies does give a little bit of leeway maybe on that offensive line. I want to get into some of your takes. I know you have an article about division bets, division totals that you would take on PFF.com, some of the teams that you like, and you have been pounding the table for the Lions. What does that mean, so to speak, right? When traditionally, before we got into the betting and gambling space and everything, we only talked about, hey, here are the teams that we like, right? We think this team is good. They're going to win 10 games. We think they're good. You're looking at this from a market standpoint. What is it about the Lions that have had you on their bandwagon this offseason? And is that a bandwagon that our listeners can still jump on, or has the market corrected to your takes here, Eric?
With the Lions, a little bit, not as much as I think. And in fact, our friends at DraftKings have not moved the Lions playoff, playoff price. It's still 4-1. For those that don't have a ton of experience betting, for a long shot like 4-1, the probability you need to believe that that's true is 1/5. So 4 + 1, so 20%. We make it more like 27%. So you're like a 7% edge is a solid bet to make, right? And so that my love for the Lions is mathematical in nature, not necessarily just like, and then and that's again, like, I have numbers that come out, I'm like, oh, Detroit kind of looks good, and then you try to come back and say, okay, well, why what is the, and you look at that team, it's like, there's a lot of talent on that team. You have 3 first-round picks on the offensive line in Decker, Sewell, and Ragnow. You have, Hawkinson's a top 10 pick at tight end, and we know, tight ends aren't always who they come out as, right? Like, most tight ends are usually, when you draft a tight end that high, and the Lions know this as well as anybody, you're drafting somebody else's tight end most of the time. Williams, Odell Beckham Jr. sat out the first 4 games of his rookie year and still, had that season that captivated all of us. I think Williams has that potential. Amon-Ra St. Brown was terrific last year. DJ Chark's a player that, can make a difference. And Jared Goff, I think last year when Ragnow sat a lot of games, Decker sat a lot of games, and Sewell was kind of piecing it back and forth, and they had a tough schedule, he is not as good, right? And take away a little bit of that pressure. Now they have the second easiest schedule in the NFL. Only the Giants have an easier schedule. The Lions' average game is 0.7 of a point easier than the average game on a neutral field. They don't play any games after 1 o'clock Eastern, right? Their only game that isn't a Sunday at 1 is the Thanksgiving game against the Bills. They play in a division where the Bears are going to be horrid. I don't think the Bears are trying to win this year. Let's be honest. The Vikings could go either way, as we all know, and the Packers are weaker than they usually are. I think they have a great defense, but offensively they're not as scary as they used to be. Then you look at the other side of the ball, and Okudah, right? We know the streakiness of corners. Okudah's been terrible so far and hurt, but like that draft pedigree that sticks with you for a while, right? And it's not beyond possibility that he could end up being good. Amani Oruwariye had 6 interceptions last year. Very feisty corner. And then obviously Aiden Hutchinson is what you want, and everything you want in a defensive end coming out of Michigan's. Dan Campbell's the head coach. That team played hard for Dan Campbell. They had the most points in the NFL last year when their win probability is 1% or less. Now, a lot of that's having a lot of time when your win percentage is 1% or less. But that's also, I don't think Detroit was trying to win last year, but I think they weren't trying to win personnel wise. I think once they got between the white lines, they tried to win. And I think that Dan Campbell certainly has that. And then the last thing, and I cannot stress upon this enough, and this is also why I'm bullish on the Giants. Anthony Lynn is gone. I don't think you can put a price on how bad Anthony Lynn is in game, making decisions for a team in the case of calling plays there. Same thing's true with Joe Judge and our friend who now calls Notre Dame football, Jason Garrett. So that's my bullish case. NFC's weak. They have an easy schedule, and they have more, who has more talent right now, Steve? The Arizona Cardinals or the Detroit Lions? Like, add it up. The Detroit Lions have more talent than the Arizona Cardinals, and somehow the Cardinals are lined at 8.5 wins, and the Lions are lined at 6.5.
The Cardinals have talent in the right spots, though. When DeAndre Hopkins comes back, and Kyler at quarterback, and but the Cardinals are definitely one of those teams when you look at their roster where it's like, I don't know if they got better. Most teams go into training camp and they're like, we got better at all these places. There's always a handful of teams where it doesn't feel like they got better. Arizona could be one of those teams. I don't hate Marquise Brown, though, as a complimentary piece there once Nuke Hopkins is back.
There's like 4 good players on that team. Like, congratulations.
Yeah, I got you. And a solid offensive line. But I get it. You have the Lions over 2.5 wins in the division over at PFF.com, best futures. Bets using just division win totals. You can check out Eric's article there. So there's still some value to be had, right? Even here in July, after you guys scooped up all that value back in May and June.
Yeah, I think what I would advise bettors this time of year is, you only have a month, right? If you're itching to bet some futures right now, I would lay off of them just because they're picked around. There hasn't been really any news for the last few months, so those numbers are beaten into place. Wait until Carson Wentz breaks his foot. Wait until something like that happens. I was on a beach on vacation. I ran back up to my room and bet Colts under 10 wins when Wentz broke his foot, and of course, I needed a miracle, Carson Wentz meltdown for that to hit, but. Bet preseason unders. That's probably better for you right now than to bet futures.
Unders.
But there are still some values, and the new markets, I think where you want to look. That's why I was looking at division wins, because you look at that NFC North, and if you bet over for the Vikings, the Packers, and the Detroit Lions division wins, you're basically just saying, hey, the Bears are going to suck. But that everybody's already bet into the fact the Bears are going to suck in some markets, so you got to bet into a different, market for that to really give you an edge.
All right, I want to wrap it up today with some of the work your team's been doing with our all coverage data. We've been collecting all sorts of new data points on every coverage play. We know the players that are playing hook curl flat, all that stuff, and then more data on receivers and one-on-one matchups against cornerbacks and separation data when they're not targeted. All sorts of new insights, how well teams cover as a unit, zone versus man, all sorts of great insights coming out of that. What are your thoughts on some of the findings that we have here in the actions that we can eventually take on some of these findings?
Well, I think the first thing that comes out of it is what the analytical process is, right? So, you like PFF has collected the best data forever, right? And I think, you ask anybody around the league and they'll tell you that, the tracking data is wonderful, but without the event data, it's kind of, it has less of a use, right? And, but our data was limited at times by, what we understood about the game at the time. And we sort of progressed forward and we're like, oh my gosh, coverage really does matter. And it matters more than just, the one-on-one matchup that ends up being a target. And so our, as opposed, I think the growth mindset in this company is fantastic. And so we go and we collect all of the coverage players at a depth that we weren't, charting it before. And, I have, every single summer I have interns, and the interns sort of like what I say is my ideas don't have consequences. I can just be like, I think this data set's great. And so why don't you just explore this and write an article about it? And of course it gets them exposure and it grows our field a little bit. And you learn something new. And I think what was great was, they were, Judah, Haley, and Arjun showed, perfectly covered plays, right? This idea that like, it's a weak link system. So, I don't really care if Darrelle Revis is locking down one side all the time, if quarterbacks can go to the second read and was it loud? I'm trying to remember the other corner of the Jets after Cromartie, who was terrible, like Lito Shepherd. If Lito Shepherd can't cover a $5 check, then who cares, right? And and Timo Riske went through and really did a very thorough analysis this week, which I hope you look at on PFF.com, which looked at essentially trying to predict at the play level. Like if you actually use this data at the play level, can you predict, how matchups will go? And, he showed that the answer is yes. So, much like our grades and much like, quarterback charting and, Big Ten throws, turnover-worthy plays, eventually it'll get gobbled up in the marketplace. Like eventually, the betting markets will reflect those things. But I think for now, like we're generating a lot of insights as to what wins at the wide receiver and defensive back position. And I think it's going to be super valuable.
Yeah, it's really good stuff because, again, I think from a PFF standpoint, so two of the trickiest positions to project are wide receiver, well, just essentially receiving and coverage players. And it's in part because of the nature of the game and roles and all sorts of different stuff. But receivers' dependency on quarterbacks, perhaps, as far as actual production goes. Cornerbacks, they depend on quarterbacks as well. They, when Tom Brady's picking on you as the weak link in the secondary over and over again, sorry, you're at the mercy of Tom Brady and who he's throwing to. So we're learning a lot more about coverage in general and receiving and how to project those players. So I think it's really good stuff that's going to show up over at PFF going forward. So
I think it's a triumph. I think it's a triumph of the analytical process. Like I said, I think everybody at PFF is extremely valuable, from the data collectors to, the people that are driving narratives to the people who are making decisions. And, we come together, and our goal, and, it's broader now than it used to be, but one of our goals is to understand the game of football better. And sometimes that requires us to look at the game differently than we had before, to build new products. And I think, it starts with the tone that you guys set, it starts with the tone that R&D sets, it starts, with data collection. And I think, for us, it's, like I said, if you're trying to understand the game better, you're not going to make, you're going to make progress.
We've made progress in our subscriptions right now because normally we give you 25% off, but it's actually 40% off. I don't know how long this is going to last, but PFF 40, you get 40% off any PFF subscription right now over at PFF.com. So be sure to take advantage of our preseason sale. This is always probably the best time to get in as far as sales go. So PFF 40, go check it out over at PFF.com and check out the PFF forecast. Eric's the co-host with George, and they break down all the good stuff as far as gambling, betting, looking forward, giving you guys the insights you need before you make a wager in particular. So go check out that. And thanks, Eric, for filling in for Sam, bringing in some good insights. So
thanks for having me, Steve. It was fun.
Yeah, always a pleasure to talk to Dr. Eager. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Monday with more great off-season NFL content.